Welcome! We're going to stitch weave number 3 in this video. And I'm not going to lie to you, this is the hardest of the weaves. So I want you to give it a good try. And if you find yourself just falling apart and getting super frustrated, you can fall back to either of these two weaves. All right? And you could trade them out for this space. I personally would trade this one over because then it would balance your pattern, but whatever works best for you, give this a go. But if you get too stressed by it, don't worry, you're not alone. So we're gonna start this one like our others. We're gonna find the longest straight section of the inside of our robes. And on this one, it's not actually gonna be a very large section. We're kind of gonna have to use our best judgment to decide what that line looks like. So I'm gonna come up here on the end and maybe play around a little bit with what that line looks like, or how far I can pull it and still have a good section of this covered without it showing on this side. So here feels pretty good. So I'm gonna go with that. Take this all the way up here, slide it under. And then I'm only gonna have a couple stitches here before I'm again going to fill in the top. So we'll check in when we get there, just so we can make sure we're being super clear. Again, checking, making sure that I'm not shoving this stitch out of the way when I come back the other direction. Okay, I think about here is where I'm gonna start just making some stitches to fill in the space. So I'm gonna come up where I normally would, and then I'm gonna go down closer to this stitch than I normally would, so that the ends of our stitches kind of melt together a little bit. And this is also going to help the angle of our stitches rotate a little bit so that it points up towards the head, instead of having to make a bunch of teeny tiny little horizontal stitches there. It's a little bit easier and I think prettier if we take the time to rotate those stitches a little bit. So the closer to the top I get, the more I'm going to want to try and slide my needle under this stitch a little bit. So you can see I moved it out of the way a little bit, and then we'll slide our needle down under. And as the angle changes, the up points here are going to get farther apart from each other, which is totally normal. And then I'm going to again bring this down under this stitch, and I can fit one more here. I'm going to jump all the way up to his head, which I can mostly reach, and then slide this needle underneath here and down mostly on the line, probably a little bit inside it, to help pull this thread down under the previous stitch and help these blend into each other. Right, then I'm going to continue adding the rest of our foundation stitches here, and then we'll check in. The end of my thread here, and I'm going to tie off. The one thing you want to remember when you tie off on the back, on your foundation stitches, you need to make sure that the anchor is really nice and tight. So you can do this by looping through. You'll see there are little stitches on the back. You could loop through that a couple times and then tie a knot to it, or you could split the ends apart and tie a square knot, but just make sure that you have a tight anchor, or this last thread will start to pull loose as we weave, and we don't want that to happen. All right, we have finished our foundation stitches. And you can see that there's a little bit of daylight between the stitches. And now, like our first two weaves, we're going to find another section of thread that doesn't add or lose any, which is going to be right here to start. And I'm actually going to start a little bit farther down because I want more width on this one. This pattern is a little bit wider in nature. So to start, we're going to start a little wider and we'll work down through some of this and then we'll work back up. So like I said, this one takes a little bit of thinking. So let's pause real quick and jump over to our pattern and we're going to talk about it for a minute. So here we go. This pattern repeats every 6 rows. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then 7 and 1 are the same. With that said, you can see that the blue rows, their base pattern is the same. It's 05, over 5, under 1, over 5, under 1, over 5, under 1. This middle row just starts in a different location, but its base is still the same, over 5, under 1. The pink rows are the same and the orange rows are the same. So this middle part is a reflection of itself. It goes blue, pink, orange. Blue is the center, and then it goes orange, pink, blue. So right here and right here, they reflect each other, which is helpful to remember because orange and pink are just the flip of each other, which can be a little bit confusing or super helpful when we're trying to figure out what we're going to do next. Like our second pattern, this is going to be stitched one direction and then we'll move down to the next row to go back the other way. So we're going to start with the base blue row of over 5, under 1 to begin. And I'm going to do it down here a little bit on this straight part. And we'll see how many threads I've got to work with. Oh, before I forget, you want to start with this side and then you can stitch the other side of this robe, because this intersection will be difficult to stitch if you already had a bunch of stitches right here. It would be really easy to get caught making all those stitches. So stitch this one first. That's why I picked it. Alrighty, so over 5. And then we're going to go under 1. On this pattern, we're only ever going to go under 1 at a time. All right, so we go over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, under 1. And then we're going to go over 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, under 1. And then all we have to do at this point is just line up our line to make it perpendicular. And that feels good to me. So I'm going to see where that ends on the side. And that's right about at the top of this line. So to make my life easy, I'm going to go right at the top of that line so I don't have to fight anything. And pull this guy down. Now we're going to work down first. So let's figure out where we need to start for our next row down. So row 2. So we finished with an over 1 after the under 1. So under 1, over 1 is what we're looking for. So right here is an under 1. Nope, that's the over. Under 1, over 1. Right? Under 1, over 1. So we're going to look down a row and let's check. Did we add a row as well? We did. So you can see that when I go down 1, I've got one more row on the side to think about. So under 1, over 1, this is our thread. I go down a row and I also added a row. So my first thing I do is going to be over this stitch, then I'm going to go under, over, under, and then over 3. All right, so we're working backwards through this line. Over 1, then we're going to go under, over 3. Okay, here we go. So I'm going to come, I just forgot what I'm doing. I'm going over first. So I'm going to scoot this thread out of the way a little bit. And remember, we're giving a little bit more space between stitches, so it's okay to check and see where your needle is. What happened there? I think I caught some of the end. Let's see if I can get it to go away. Don't think I'm gonna be able to. We will trim it later. Okay, over one, under one, over one, under one. This is the under, over, under part. And then I'm gonna go over 1, 2, 3, but let's pull this through first. And we will snip that little thread right here real quick. I'm just gonna slide my scissors as far down on that thread as I can get them. Cut it off. It's like it never happened. All right, so then it's the over 3 part of the pattern. And now I'm gonna go under, over, under. And then it's over 3, 1, 2, 3, under 1 is where we're gonna finish this row. And we can check back and see, you know, it's not pretty yet. Single rows are harder to keep in place as we start. Here, that I finished on an over 1, sorry, an under 1, and I finished on an under 1 here, because this edge is my straight edge. So I finished on an under 1, which means that I hopefully did most of that right, and I could go back through and check. Now for row 3, since this is our straight edge, all I have to do is figure out what this orange row says, which says over 1, under 1, over 1. Nope, over 1, under 1, over 1, under 1, then over 3. And then I repeat from the star, and I'll do that part again. So we're gonna go over 1 first. And I'm gonna keep reminding myself I'm making bigger gaps between the stitches, because the last time I stitched this, I had it a little too tight and it became frustrating, and we don't want to get frustrated today. Right here on this line, down just a little bit for the stitch. Our first one is over, over, and then I'm going to go under 1, over 1, under 1, and then I go over 3. And so you can see, oh, I just pulled it out. Try again. Over 1, under 1, over 1, under 1. Okay, what I was gonna say, what you can see here, let me catch this with my needle real quick, is that the previous over, under, over section is now just 3 threads right here. And the over, under, over section on here was 3 threads before. This is what I meant when I said that the pink and orange lines reflect each other. So now I go under, over 3, and then under for that last stitch on the side. And then we'll make sure this is pulled up nice and tight and help scoot some of these guys over so we can see what's going on there. Here we go. And down into the fabric. And now it's a blue row, which means its base is over 5, under 1, but it's going to be lined up a little bit differently than the first time across. So I'm going to, let's check before I figure out where that needle needs to go. So we finished on over 3, under 1, which is on this orange line, over 3, under 1. Under 1 is the edge. We're gonna add a line most likely, so we need to check what that was. So if I go down and add a line, it's gonna be under the next line, then over 5, under 1, over 5. So under 1 and then over 5, which means I don't really have to fight with this little end right here. I can just come up right next to it as an under stitch, and then I can go over 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then the last ones will be overs. So what you can see here is that these under ones on the on the rows where you go over 5, the under ones are always going to be in the middle of an under 1, over 1, under 1. They're always going to interact in this same spot. Hopefully that's helpful and not just a lot more confusing. Pull that up there. Go down on the edge. And now we're going to repeat this row, which is row number 5. We're starting on the straight side. So we can go back to our guide and we can look at row number 5 from the straight side here and just do exactly what it says. And it says we're going to go over 1, under 1, over 1, under 1, and then we'll go over 3. So over 1, under 1, over 1, under 1, and now I'm going to go over 3. And then we do under, over, under, over 3. 1, 2, 3. Under, and our last stitch will be over. Here we go. Now let's come up on the line. And figure out what happens next. So this is row 6. It's going to be this pink row. So let's figure out where we ended. We ended after an over 3, under 1, over 1. So on our orange line, we got an over 3, under 1, over 1 was our finish. We aren't adding any lines. So we're going to take this over 1 directly down, and that's the middle of this over 3. So we're going to go over 2, under 1, over 1, under 1. Over 2, under 1, over 1, under 1. All right. Over 2, under 1, over 1, under 1. And I know that's right, A, because I looked at my pattern, but B, because this section right here, that's an over 3. So I know this side has to be the under, over, under section. Now I go over 3, and then it's again under, over, under, over 3, which means I'm going to finish on an under 1. I'll pull that all up. And sometimes it's going to be before, till the next row before that will stay straight. And go down. And it looks like we'll be able to finish row 7, get a full repeat in before we start losing lines on the left-hand side. So row 7 is like row 1, which means we're going to go over 5, under 1, over 5, under 1. Over 5, under 1. Over 5, under 1. Now at this point, I usually come back in and help straighten out these over 1, under 1s, over 1, over, under, overs, unders, all the things. The spots where it's just 1 each way will get a little more squished, and you can help them out as you continue on stitching down. So we just finished this row, and now we're going to figure out what happens going back. So this is row 7, which is important because what happened before is what needs to happen on the other side. So I went over 3 on the blue, 1, 2, 3, and then I'm going to add a line my next row down. So I'm going to check that out right here, and that's where I am. So I'm going to go over 3 and then under, over, under. That's where we are. Over 3, under, over, under. I'm going to come up on the outside of this guy. And I'm going to go over 3. The other way I can check and know that this is right is that this section right here, this under 1, I know it needs to kind of be locked in every time I go by it. So I'm going to lock it in by going under, over, under on the other side. Then it's the over 3, and then I come to the next one, and I go under, over, under to lock in that one. And then I go over 3, 1, 2, 3. And it would be an under right here, but I'm not going to try and thread my needle there. I'm going to pull my needle through here, and then I'm just going to go down right kind of into and at this spot, because it already feels a little tight, the row above. So I don't need to fight with that. I can just pull this down into there. All right, now the next row down, let's come up on the side here. Let's see if we can figure it out by just looking at our pattern here on our king instead of pulling the paper over. So you can see I've got this section here of under, over, unders around the single, and I've got one right here. So I can see this is a completed little square, which means the next thing that happens below it is over 3. So I know that these ones are going to be over 3s. And on the other side of that is going to be an under and an over. So I'm going to go over first. And then I'm going to go under, then over 3, then under, over, under, over, oh, I think I split a thread. There we go. Under, over 3, under, over, under. And then let's go down in the fabric with our needle, not just with hopes and dreams. Okay, let's think about this before I fight that thread and figure out exactly where I need to be. The other way to think about this pattern is to look at the threads in this little section. Let me grab another needle right here. So this goes over 1, this goes over 3, this goes over 5, this goes over 3, that goes over 1. So I know on my next time through, this goes over 1, and then we've kind of got our little square. So we'll go over 1, under 1, and then over 1. So I know this is an under 1 right here because I just counted. Over 1, over 3, over 5, over 3, over 1, under 1, and then the pattern repeats. Over 1, under 3, over 1, over 3, over 5, over 3, over 1. I hope that makes some sense. So I'm going to keep adding a few more here, and then I'll see if there's anything else I forgot to tell you. Here it is, what I forgot to tell you. So if we follow that pattern that I just counted out, counting the overs here in the middle, and I know this is an under 1, that says to me on the sides of this need to be an over 5. I could also figure that out right here because I've got an over 1, over 3, then this needs to be over 5, which means this is an under 1, which means this edge is going to be overs when I start. Now, the next row. Counting our overs, I know this is over 1, over 3, over 5, which means this space is going to be an over 3. And the over 3 lines are over 3, under 1, over 1, under 1. Repeat. So on this row, over 1, over 3, over 5, over 3, I know I need an over 1. So I can come up here and I can look at this line and I know better clue what's going on. So I translate that down here. That means I'm going over these 3, which means this first stitch is an under. The last row has 2 over 3s, which means I need to go over 4, under 1, not over 4, over 5, under 1, over 5, under 1. You can always use your needle when it's slid through to help push up the previous row and make it square. Over 5, which means this is going to be an over 3. So I reflect this row. It ended on the same spot, so that means I'm just going to follow exactly what's above it. I'm going to make sure these, I only ever go under 1, right? I just tried to reverse it in my head. So I follow that row before. I'm going to lose a thread here, so we'll pull through. Slide these up a little bit, and then finish under into at this last stitch. Now you just continue this method all the way down and all the way up. I know this pattern is a lot to think about, but I think the finish is beautiful if you can fight through the thinking. So just take your time, try to understand the pattern first, and don't be afraid to refer back to your paper as many times as you need to. Find the spot where you were, go down to the next line or up to the next line, making those kind of squares of over 1, over 3, over 5, over 3, over 1, or making little intersections of over, under, overs that kind of make this little checkerboard box. Are really good landmarks to figure out what's going on. And then just remember, as soon as it gets difficult to weave, probably about here, you can stop, especially if it falls in the right spot in the pattern. Don't worry about fighting your way up through here. Just go as high as you can and then keep stitching. Also, if you gave it a good try and it just wasn't working, remember you've learned 2 other weaves that you could flip for this spot as well. And I would pick this one if you liked this one. And then your hoop will be balanced, or it will still be fabulous if you use this pattern twice in a row. You're doing great. Keep stitching. I believe in you.